This coalition of countries is likely to declare war on the Ottoman Empire and their allies. So, how would this change the balance of power in the world? Welcome to Project Kaisertum, where Germany was able to capture Paris in 1914 and win the Great War 2 years later. In the post-war world, there would be a lot of tension, most of which would resolve with this massive conflict. The Ottoman Empire would be on the chopping block, since they promoted jihad against France, Britain and Russia. This resulted in Egypt, Pakistan and Morocco to get liberated. But I'm also yet to mention the insurgency in Russia. The Russians would still be ruled by the provisional government of Alexander Kerensky, which would start to reform into the Russian state. Due to the Ottoman request for jihad, Central Asia would rebel against the Russian rule. It is vital for Russia to win this conflict, as there are the few remaining oil supplies in Russia. This is because Russia has lost the Baku oil fields to the Ottoman Empire after the Great War. If Russia were to lose, they would need to get oil from the Ottoman Empire, which would strengthen their rival. Since the Russians had time to prepare their military, I would say that due to sheer manpower, the Russians would quickly crush this rebellion. On the other hand, the Ottoman Empire had just set a big target on their nation, as now many countries would be willing to partition them. This is not only because they anger the former Entente by initiating jihad, but also because they're in the process of ethnic cleansing. This would hurt Bulgarians and Greeks especially badly. In this alternate timeline, the Turks would try to consolidate power in Smyrna, which was majority Greek at the time. The Greek people would be deported deep into central Anatolia, with the goal for the Ottomans to populate this region by ethnic Turks. This would obviously cause international outrage, as many Greeks would lose their lives in the process of migrating to their new homes. Under terrible conditions, many of the Greeks would perish, with the death toll starting to approach in the tens of thousands. This is also followed in Constantinople, the Ottoman capital city. This is because at the time, the city had many Greeks living in it, and it was actually almost 50-50 split between Christian and Muslim. The Ottomans would like their capital city to be more Turkish and Muslim, so the Greeks there would be deported, where again many would perish. The Kingdom of Greece is obviously very angered at this situation, with many in Greece demanding for the Greek state to save their brothers and sisters before it's too late. Many in Greece still remember the time when the Ottoman Empire ruled most of the Balkans, and they remember the horrors of living under these conditions. There would be protests in most Greek major cities, with a call to action to invade the Ottoman Empire and annex the Aegean coast. Greece, Bulgaria and Albania are allied, forming the Salonika Pact. Bulgaria also has their minorities in Eastern Thrace, who would also be subject of ethnic cleansing. As a result, it's very possible for the Salonika Pact to strike the Ottoman Empire first, with the goal of liberating their respective people and include them into their respective countries' borders. Now you may say that Albania will not participate in this war, or that they would switch sides just so they can help their Muslim brothers in the Ottoman Empire. This I think will not happen. Albania is still a young country, being formed in late 1912, so by 1925 they would be 13 years old. The Albanians also have a notable Christian minority, so this move would immediately cause a civil war in Albania, and to top it all off, the Albanians were also repressed by the Ottomans, so they are not looking to help them in any way. However, to prevent another Balkan War, the Salonika Pact needs to agree regarding the spheres of influence in advance, or they would start fighting each other right after this war. The Balkan states would agree that Greece would get Constantinople, due to the majority Greek population of the city. Bulgaria is ruled by Ferdinand I, who has historically wanted to conquer the city of Constantinople and rename it to Tsarigrad and be crowned in there. This ambition, however, would for sure doom his alliance with Greece, so even if Bulgaria were to get Constantinople and betray their allies, they can expect Greece and Albania to declare war on them in order to seize some land. But also I can see Romania to get involved, if not even Austria-Hungary, who would wish to expand Serbia-Montenegro. Bulgaria already knew what would happen in this situation, as just 12 years prior to that, Bulgaria lost a lot of land in the Second Balkan War. This is why I think that Ferdinand I of Bulgaria would let Greece have Constantinople, but want compensation elsewhere. This can be in Serbia-Montenegro, where Bulgaria can annex them if something were to happen to the unstable Habsburg monarchy, to which Greece would agree. Albania would also be compensated with some Bulgarian lands in Macedonia and eventually with Kosovo, if the Salonika Pact ends up fighting the Habsburgs. Finally, Greece and Bulgaria would split Eastern Thrace, with Greece taking the Anatolian coast. While this is how the new borders would be drawn in case of a victory, there is only one problem. The problem is that Germany is reliant on oil from the Ottoman Empire, which has practically monopolized this commodity. The Germans are not willing to lose their trading partner of such vital resource, so they would need to get involved or get creative. In the first day of the war, the Salonika Pact would make some solid gains, advancing toward Constantinople, and Greece would land and liberate Smyrna. The Russians would be quick to enter the war, hoping to somehow get Constantinople and secure it first. The Russians would also like to take Georgia, Armenia, and most importantly Azerbaijan with their oil fields. This would include even Ottoman Armenia, so the Russians can expand greatly in the conflict. As Russia would enter the war, this would force Persia to enter the war as well, as they would race to reach the Baku oil fields first. The Persians would also like to annex all of Azerbaijan, as they already hold a large Azeri minority within their borders. But also, Persia wants to prevent the Muslim Azeris to be forced to join Christian Russia. Persia would also push to take Mesopotamia and the important city of Baghdad. Seeing this unfold, the Arab portion of the Ottoman Empire is also likely to rebel, as they were opposed to Turkish rule, but also because they can benefit from this move. The Ottoman Empire is practically fighting a war on all fronts, and their only allies are Afghanistan and Pakistan, who are not looking to join this conflict. France and Britain also have distaste for the Ottoman Empire, but they are not officially joining. This is because of the elections in these countries, where the political division will just keep on growing. This is important as during these vital times, the French and the British cannot take advantage over the Ottoman Empire's collapse. In the case of France, parties like the French Revival and the Popular Front are demanding war, and their popularity is increasing at the expense of the Republican Front. By the 1922 elections, I expect France to have 26% support for the French Revival, 38% for the Popular Front, 10% for the Independent Radicals, and only 26% for the Republican Front. The Popular Front and the Independent Radicals have similar political ideas, but even a coalition between the two would not secure a majority, so France is yet again stuck politically. In Britain, the popularity of the Labour Party and the National Socialist Party would increase at the expense of other parties. This would result in the Conservative Party to dissolve, due to them losing any credibility and votes. I expect the Labour Party to become the biggest party in Britain, having around 45% of the votes, with the National Socialist Party getting 20% of the votes. This leaves us with the Liberal Party, which would have around 35% of the votes. Due to political instability, both countries cannot take advantage of this war. Germany is screwed as they want to support their former ally in order to get cheap oil from them, but the situation in which the Ottoman Empire is in looks unsavable. Thus, Germany has two options. The first option is that they join the war on the side of the Ottoman Empire, which would for sure make France and Britain to join the opposite side, wanting to take revenge, leaving Germany in a war on two fronts and in a disadvantageous position. This is because the enemies of Germany would be determined to take revenge, while the German soldiers would want peace and prosperity. Austro-Hungary and Illyria is also unlikely to help Germany, unlike in the First World War, due to their internal problems with the Hungarians. Germany would realize that supporting the Ottoman Empire would be a suicidal mission, so they would maneuver the situation. Germany would throw their full support behind Persia, sending them all the military aid that they would need, in order to capture the Baku oil fields and Baghdad. This is very strategic, as we all know, Britain historically owned most of the oil in Persia and later Iran. This time, Britain would lose the war, so Germany can potentially fill in the power vacuum and assume direct ownership over some Persian oil wells. In doing so, if Persia were to capture all of the territories I just mentioned, Germany would still have a secure way to get their oil from a friendly country, so there would be no need to save the Ottoman Empire. Additionally, Persia and Russia would compete in Central Asia and in the Caucasus, so the Persians are a natural ally of Germany, as they want to prevent Russian expansion at all costs. Now, regarding the war, another front would open. While Britain is having trouble politically, India is a dominion and they are willing to invade Pakistan. This is because Pakistan is vulnerable, as they only became an independent country 4 years prior to this alternate war. Their biggest supporter was also the Ottoman Empire, which is right now in the process of being dismantled. There is nothing to prevent India from simply retaking Pakistan, so a successful invasion of the country would follow. Bulgaria and Greece would advance and reach the Chtalja defensive line, which is the Ottomans' last hope for defending their capital city. Russia is having slow progress pushing through the Caucasian mountains, so they would navally invade Batumi and Thrace, which naval invasions would eventually link up and expand. In these uncertain times, the Vilayet of Georgia would declare independence, but the Russians would declare war on them and hope to annex them. The Arabs would claim all of the Arabian Peninsula in addition to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan and the Palestine region. There is a conflict of interest with the Persians, who also claim Iraq in this war, so the two sides would race to reach Baghdad. As for Persia, due to German help and volunteers, as well as geographical proximity, they were able to quickly seize the Baku oil fields and maybe Baghdad. This would anger both the Russian and the Arab sides, as Persia was able to capture their respective claimed lands. In the following weeks, the Salonika Pact would eventually capture Constantinople. This is possible as Russia knows they will not be allowed to keep it even if they capture it, so there is no race for Constantinople. The Russians will not be upset at this, as the Salonika Pact is majority Orthodox Christians, so the two sides can potentially work together as allies in the future. The Salonika Pact also angered Germany as they invaded their former ally, so it's not like the Germans have any influence over the Salonika Pact and by extension the Bosphorus Strait. Russia and Iran would practically split Azerbaijan in half, while the Russians would occupy and later annex Georgia and Armenia. The goal of Russia is also to include the Ottoman Armenian territories, which unfortunately were in the process of ethnic cleansing for years, starting during the Great War. The goal of Russia is to achieve any sort of victory, just so they can calm down their rebelling population. Let's not forget that there were many Bolsheviks in Russia, but in 1924, Lenin would still die, so the potential Bolshevik revolution would take a big hit. There was a possibility of the Bolsheviks to start a civil war in Russia, but their support is low, sitting at around 15%. This means that even if they initiate a civil war, most likely they would be defeated. This is why the Bolsheviks are waiting for another massive war to start, just so they can take advantage of the great powers fighting each other and strike at the right time, hoping to turn the whole world communist. Regarding the war, Britain and India would not have any trouble invading, occupying and annexing Pakistan. The British would also return the port city of Karachi to India as to show goodwill. Still, adding hostile Pakistan back to the British crown would destabilize India, but the Hindus are more numerous than the Muslims, so they can quell the rebellions. India is also a country of equals, so the Muslims would enjoy religious freedom and economic prosperity, which they didn't have in their own state. As a result, the Indians would soon consolidate power over Pakistan. At this point, the war is looking dire for the Ottoman Empire, so they would sue for peace, which would be mediated in Berlin. The Germans would honor the request of the Salonika Pact to take Constantinople, because they don't want the Russians to get the city. Establishing Constantinople as a free city is also impossible due to Greece and Bulgaria already controlling it, and Germany cannot threaten these countries, or a coalition would form against them. As a result, the Germans would have to befriend the Salonika Pact, whose members are also in Middle Europa, the German Economic Customs Union. The Salonika Pact would get all of their claimed lands agreed to upon themselves. This would be a massive victory in the Balkans and strengthen the bond between the Salonika Pact members. Bulgaria didn't gain a lot of lands, but they were promised Serbia-Montenegro in the future, without Kosovo, which would go to Albania. If the Balkan states, including Romania, find themselves at war against Austria-Hungary and Illyria, the Salonika Pact and the remainder of the Ottoman Empire would also do a population exchange, so Greeks and Pontus would be safely relocated to mainland Greece, while Turks in Thrace would be relocated to the Anatolian Peninsula. Russia would annex the Vilayet of Georgia, including Swaziland, but also the entirety of Armenia and only the northern part of Azerbaijan. Persia would annex the remainder of Azerbaijan, getting this cheap oil in the process, while also expanding into Mesopotamia and the Kurdish majority regions of the Ottoman Empire. The Arab states would also annex the Arab majority regions of the Ottoman Empire, but there is a problem, which is Israel, or more specifically, the few Jews in the Palestine region. Since this is the Jewish Holy Land, including the city of Jerusalem, it can cause problems in the Middle East. Germany forcing an independent Israel would be ironic, but also a very bad idea, since this would antagonize the Arabs, with whom Germany wants to have good relations and trade oil. The Germans can therefore either abandon the Jews or give the Palestine region to Egypt. I think giving it to Egypt makes more sense, as the Egyptians are a multi-religious country, tolerant of different religions, which is actually represented in their flag. The Germans can therefore know that the Jews would be safer under Egypt, but also this move will not anger the Arabs too much, as to them another Arabic country is getting this land. Now you may ask, why would Germany care about the Jews, as most of the countries at the time were openly anti-Semitic? Well, this I think is because Germany wants to look like the good guys on the international stage, and allowing a possible genocide to happen will not help them with this image. Another thing you may be wondering is why wouldn't Italy get involved and take some free land? While this is true, the Italian economy is just starting to recover. The Italians would be ruled by the political party Italy First, which suggests that Italy should take a neutral approach and try to grow its economy. Fighting an expensive war just to get some land would not help with the declining standard of living in Italy, at least compared to that of Germany and Austria-Hungary and Illyria. This is why I believe that Italy would not participate in this war, but focus on growing its economy. This is the top priority because Italy had just gained a lot of land from France, and if there were to be an economic collapse in Italy, not only Italy First would lose power, but these new holdings would rebel. It is vital for Italy to improve economically, or they could risk losing their gains in the Great War. Now to mention the remainder of the Ottoman Empire, which would now be called the Turkish Sultanate. They would completely collapse economically and politically, so this new state would be very unstable. The Germans would step in and fill the power vacuum and stabilize the Turkish Sultanate. The Russians would also do the same, hoping to get an ally in the region. This is vital for Russia, as Persia cannot be befriended, which leaves only the Arab state and the Turkish Sultanate as a possible ally to the Russian people. The Arab state is not connected to Russia, and their foreign goals are not focused elsewhere, so the Turkish Sultanate is the only realistic ally of Russia. This is because the Russians can influence the new country and prevent them from reclaiming the Russian lands that they just gained, but also Russia and the Turkish Sultanate can partition the Persian Empire. The Persians would realize this, so they would join Germany's side in an attempt to invest and befriend the Turkish Sultanate. This would benefit the Turkish people the most, as their neighboring countries would be in a bidding war. Realistically, this would increase the standard of living in the Turkish Sultanate, but also, I think it's fair to say that Germany and Persia would win the state over on their side. This is because Germany is wealthier than Russia, so they can keep their bidding war for longer. The Germans would invest in the Turkish Sultanate, as they would build factories and most importantly, infrastructure. This is important as the railroads would be repaired and new ones would be built. This would allow for Germany to still get oil from the Middle East, but this time from Persia, who would control the majority of the supply. Germany would purchase Persian oil, which would flow through the Turkish railroads built and owned by Germany, then through the Balkans and Austria, finally reaching Germany. In this move, the Germans still secured their vital oil supply, while preventing Russia from taking the Baku oil fields. Germany also has good relations with the Salonika Pact, with the Turkish Sultanate, with Persia and with the Arab state, but also Egypt. This means that Germany maneuvered the situation perfectly and has good relations with all of these states in the Middle East, so they didn't have to save the crumbling Ottoman Empire. While this would benefit Germany, the other European countries of France and Britain, but also Italy, had missed their chance. France and Britain had a problem with political instability, while Italy was too stubborn to take any action. In the case of France, they would have an election in 1926, so a year after this war. This would change quite a lot of things in French politics. The Republican Front has always had a stance against war, ever since France was defeated in the Great War. The thing is that all of the other parties were pro-war, but they were too different ideologically to work together. This would result in all the political parties to attack the Republican Front, with riots destroying buildings owned by the Republican Front. The Republican Front would thus be blamed for France losing in Morocco and not being able to take advantage of the Ottoman Empire's collapse. So this would result in the Republican Front to collapse internally and cease to exist. By the 1930 elections, I expect France to have 36% support for the French revival, 48% for the Popular Front, and 16% for the independent radicals. Still, as you can see, no side has 50% majority, but the independent radicals can join either side to form a stable government. You may think that this is strange, but remember that the independent radicals were a centrist party. More importantly, the party is described as voting with the right on economic interests while voting with the left on political issues. In this timeline, the right is represented by the far-right French Revival Party, which aims to retake the former lands of France as to restore their glory, but also want to unite all the French speakers under one banner, including the ones of Switzerland and Belgium. Some extremist factions are calling for France to extend their borders to naturally defensible positions, and some even want to establish puppet states around France, making sure that France and Paris is never captured again. The independent radicals can join the French revival and vote with them regarding economic interests, or they can join with the left, which is the Popular Front, and vote with them on political interests. This means that it's possible for the independent radicals to make either the far-right ultranationalist French revival party victorious, or they can make the far-left socialist Popular Front victorious in these elections. Let me remind you that France would be without a functioning government for 8 years already. So the independent radicals would hold a vote on which side they would want to join, only for the sake of improving France politically and economically. The independent radicals are tolerant both to the left and to the right, so they can swing either way, making France socialist or ultranationalist. What would happen is that there would be a vote among the 39 independent radicals members with a seat in the parliament. What would happen is that 19 representatives of the independent radicals would vote for France to swing to the ultranationalist side, while also 19 other people would vote for France to go down the socialist path. This leaves us only with one vote to decide the whole future of France, and this is where you come into the picture. Go down into the video's description and vote regarding which way you would like to see France swing in this series. Whichever path gains the most votes will win. While you're down there, make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out the next episode, and to see which way France would swing politically. You can watch the video on the screen, and I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.